Hi guys, I'm Dimension Jumper and today I'll be reviewing The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, which was released for the Nintendo 64 in 2000, and its 3D remake for the Nintendo 3DS, which was released in 2015. Now this is a sequel to Ocarina of Time, and it takes place some place after the events of Ocarina of Time and after Link has killed Ganondorf. And now Link has been sent to find Navi, his fairy companion thing, after she left him for some reason. We don't know why, but apparently she left him for some reason. And he then runs into the Skull Kid, who's been got this weird mask on him, which we later find out it's Majora's Mask. And then he later finds out that he has to save the world from impending doom because of the moon, which will crash down in 3 days. Now this storyline is a lot darker in terms of its plots and its themes, because this is probably one of the only Zelda games, including Breath of the Wild 2, even though we've only got a teaser trailer from it, to have a sort of darker, more edgier storyline. And I think it works, because if you look back at the other Zelda games that came before Majora's Mask, it was kind of quite light and kind of even though it was it had some compelling themes, Majora's Mask had some sort of much more edgier sort of this isn't your traditional Zelda game. And Zelda game, you basically meet a lot of people that are from both Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time. For example, the Happy Mask Salesman, some Zoras, the Gorons, but a lot of them aren't the same. Basically, the races are still there, but they're not a lot of the characters aren't the same. Especially for the Zoras and the Gorons, they're not actually the same characters you saw in Ocarina of Time. And throughout the game, you collect a bunch of masks, and I think the mask collecting is quite good, because you get a variety of masks. The main ones being the transformation masks. Now throughout the game, you'll learn that you have to free 4 different giants. Now the giants all inhabit one area of the land, and the masks you collect are based on some of the locations they're based on. So for the first one, it's the Deku mask, which helps you get through the first dungeon, and you only get it because the Skull Kid kind of trapped you as a Deku scrub, and yeah, and you get the strong feeling to heal yourself. And I think this sort of usage of using different masks to help you out is quite good, because the transformation masks are from the 3 different races. The Deku mask will help you turn into a Deku. The Goron mask would help you turn into a Goron. And the Zora mask, which will help you turn into a Zora. Now all of these masks, all 3 of the transformation masks in particular, have their own different abilities. So when you turn into the Deku scrub, you can do spins, and you can use bubbles. For the Goron mask, you can turn into a Goron, but you can also do its rolling attack, and you can dish out a couple of punches. And for the Zora mask, you can use the fins as a boomerang, and you can also use a sort of special sort of barrier thing, and you can also swim quite well. yeah, and yeah, there's like a lot of other good masks. For example, the Giant's mask, which only can be used in one specific area, and it basically makes Link into a giant colossus of himself. So that's quite cool. And also another one that's quite cool is the bunny hood. Even though it's not technically a mask, it does make up for a good portion of the game if you want to get to one place to the other. Because basically, it's basically if Link was Sonic, but instead of being blue, he's green. He wears green clothes, and instead of having a fox as his friend, he's got a fairy, who's called not I forgot the name of the new fairy companion in this game, but it's slightly better than Navi in my opinion. As I said before, this game takes place in 3 days, but you are able to go back to the first day, and it's the thing is like really cool. But one of the major differences between both versions is that every time you go back in time in the original, in the 64 version, the game would always save. Unlike in the 3DS version, you would have to save either before going back in time or after you've gone back in time. And I think that's where the 64 version comes in handy and gets like a little bit more of an edge, is that you don't have to worry about saving once you go back in time. And I kind of wish that the 3DS version kind of kept, because the saving is really a helpful thing. Another major differences are the two different graphics. So the 64 version is basically more like blocky texture graphic types types things, or not the 64 version, but the 3DS version is more like HD 3D type stuff. Even though they both use 3D, I think that the 3DS version has slightly better graphics than the 64 version. And also there's like different places of certain things. For example, the stone mask, which allows you to become invisible to the naked eye and makes you look like a literal rock, is in a different place. So for example, in the 64 version, the original place was before Grand Canyon, in the canyon section of the map, while in the 3DS version it's in the Pirate's Palace fortress thing, yeah, because the guard you need to find has the stone mask, but he's injured, but you need to give him a potion. And yeah, it's basically the same thing but in two different locations. Yeah, and when you find out about Majora's Mask, you learn that it has like this unspeakable evil power inside of it, and it's basically controlling the Skull Kid. And it has done these like awful crimes, like as I said before, the moon. It's also terrorized some of the locals, like turning a man into a child, and he's embarrassed to meet his lover. And that's why he uses like the Keaton Pikachu mask thing. in the game, which is kind of sort of useful when you get it. And that's probably the longest side quest in the game, because a lot of Zelda games have got like a lot of good side quests, but the Andrew and Cafe, which are the two people who are in love and are duly wed, basically you have to find like not only a bunch of masks and get worth into the game, but also get a Epona so you can like go to the canyon section and get Cafe's sun mask so he can give to Anju. And it takes place like all 3 days, so you have to like make sure you actually get yourself prepared to do those 3 days with the whole Anju and Cafe. But if you want to get all the masks, including the last mask, which is the Vestiges mask, you basically have to find every single like mask quest, so on and so forth. The dungeons in the game are quite good because they utilize, as I said before, the masks. So, for example, the final temple uses not only like the mask's abilities, but also when you use them for specific places, not only do you use their powers, but you can also use their instruments. Now, the instruments in the game, you get obviously the ocarina, but you also get the for the Digibaba, it's pipes. For the Zora, it's a guitar, and for the Goron, it's drums. And you get like not only old music but new music. One of the new ones is the Elegy of Emptiness, which is basically the song which makes a statue duplicate of yourself, which made like this really well known creepypasta, which I'll talk more about in the review. Now it's time for some gameplay. Now the gameplay for Majora's Mask, it's kind of the same as Ocarina of Time. So you've got your spin attack and your great spin attack. Great spin attack you can get from one of the great fairies in the game. You've got your like kind of like thrusting attack with your sword. You can roll just like in the game. You can. Yeah, but it's basically just the same. I don't know how to really explain it more, but I think like the world of the game is quite clever, because you can't get to certain points without certain things. So, for example, this fence over here, you can't get that without getting a Epona. So, and you can only get a Epona once you've beaten the second temple. In the game, which is like over there, like where those mountains are. Yeah, and every time you use the spin attack, it uses up magic. And yeah, and also with things like the Goron spin, you basically turn into like a rolling spiked machine of like destruction. But that also uses up magic. So I advise you to use the Gorn one sparingly, and also if you don't get enough speed, you do get hit by like things like the choo-choos, and also your punches really don't hit these enemies particularly well, because they're really not like, you know, the hands or the fists really didn't do that much damage at all. Yeah, for the Tiki Scrub, you can basically spin around and also a treat punch goes out the head. You can also do the bubbles, like, and again that also uses magic, just like the golden spin. And finally, for the Zora mask, if you wanted to activate the barrier, you can do it one of two ways. If you tug it like this and go like that, that's how you activate it. And if you want to do the thin boomerangs, you basically punch and release. Basically press and hold the B button and basically release. And you can make them like large or small. And also another barrier, the barrier can be activated if you go underwater and you're swimming. I think that's quite cool. So yeah, that's been it for the gameplay, and it's time to go back to the review. So as I said before, the Elegy of Emptiness is a song that not only makes duplicates of yourself, but has also brought up a really well-known Zelda creepypasta called Been Drowned. And I think this is sort of like an interesting kind of creepypasta, because what it is that this guy bought a copy of Majora's Mask, the original one, from like some sort of sale. I think it was like a garage sale or something. He took it home, but once he took it home and started playing it, he realized that the game was like really glitched out, and there was the only thing that was following him was the statue of Link. And then something happened. I can't exactly remember what happened, but the creepypasta has been known for Been Drowned just because of that specific cartridge. And I think that's kind of interesting, like how one statue can make like an entire creepypasta out of itself, and it's like really interesting. Like a lot of the stuff you find like surrounding like specific things it fascinates me in some form or another. So if for the final like boss, you basically fight Majora's Mask itself, and there are 3 different phases. There's its sort of like normal form, which is basically the masks but with tentacles. The second form is basically a more like humanoid version, I think, and then the third form is basically more humanoid looking, but this time with tentacles for arms. But before you can even fight the Majora's Mask, you have to basically talk to the 4 other mask people. Because basically on the final day, you basically go into the moon after you free like all the giants and stuff. You basically go into the moon itself, and it's basically a meadow. Like there's trees. There's just one tree and a big field filled with children with the masks of the bosses you've faced. And the bosses, side note, the bosses, apart from the final 2 bosses, have the most difficult, hard to pronounce names ever. Because there's Ardolwa or something, Goat or Gohot, because it's like Goht. It's like Gohot or goat. It's a mechanical goat, but it's got. So it's a goat, but it's you get what I'm saying. There's also Georg or George. It's basically a massive fish called Georg or George. And then there's the final one called Twin Mold, which is basically the only boss, aside from the final boss, which has the most easy to pronounce name out of the other 3 bosses before that one. And then they basically tell you to do like a hive seek with you, and you basically give them the masks you've found along your journey. And then the final child, the Majora's Mask kid, will then give you the Fierce Deity's mask, and it's basically the most OP mask in the game, because, well, you can only use it in boss areas, but you can also use it to basically make the final fight between the Majora's Mask in basically like a couple of minutes. It's just very, very simple, very, very, like, just... And then that basically breaks the cycle of the whole 3 days. And so my final verdict of the game is that it's a really good game. It's basically, it's really enjoyable. It's got a lot of characters that you might recognize if you've played like Ocarina of Time. And it's got like kind of like Groundhog's Day kind of feel, if you know what I mean, in which most character has like to relive the same day all over again. But instead of being 1 day, it's the same 3 days. And I think in the game, it gives you a generous amount of time because of the whole 3 days thing. And there's a lot of like cool and interesting masks, a lot of interesting characters, a lot of interesting locations, and it really shows what a darker, more edgier Zelda game can be. And I really hope this sort of thing comes again, sort of like in the sequel to Breath of the Wild, because of how, Gandalf is the whole mummified body thing, and the whole cryptic music sort of feel to it in the teaser trailer that we saw. So yeah, that's been my review for both Majora's Masks for the Nintendo 64 and its 3DS remake. And I hope you enjoyed that video, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.